she was Taylor Swift. This was with 7 witnesses and a photograph. And so, she says, she's talking about it at a concert a year later. And she says, I just keep thinking about what it's like for all those humans who are abused and assaulted who don't have those things. Everybody, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Erin.
I'm Dr. Kristen.
You are so very welcome to our content today. If you don't know us, we're PhDs. We have social science degrees in the humanities, which basically means we are exceptionally well trained to study and talk about people and cultures. We love to do this in a whole host of ways on our YouTube channel and our sister podcast. Through looking at popped and lived culture, we look at Bridgerton, things we shouldn't say anymore, why everybody is a little bit racist, or why you should really learn to find structured joy and how you can do so in Hallmark Christmas movies. We do all of this in service of our goal and belief that we can build more inclusive communities by teaching and talking about curiosity and empathy. If you would like to join the discussion with us, we would love for you to do so. We turn on recording devices so that we can talk to other people besides each other, which we do nonstop, Hamilton reference. And please like, subscribe, share, rate and review, do all of the platformy things that you possibly can, and make sure to comment and engage with us whenever.
Today's conversation is a part of a series that we have that's essentially what can we learn from things that are streaming? And it runs the gamut. We do shows, we do documentaries. And as we're recording this, kind of moving on for the rest of 2021, we're going to be doing kind of one-shotty type things for a host of reasons, including that I get to give another TED Talk. And I'm very excited about it. But it's giving those TEDx's are just a little bit of work. And so we didn't want to dive into a series. And instead, we wanted to absorb the incredible cornucopia of content there is out there that teaches us about empathy. And the first thing we're going to talk about is Ms. Taylor Swift and her documentary, Miss Americana. Now, we need to confess something up front. This documentary took us from nominal fans to like super fans.
I wouldn't say super fans because we're not like gonna get tattoos and we don't.
No, that's fairly true. But like
cats' names, but
we've both watched it twice, if not more than that. We believe deeply in protecting Taylor Swift from her online crap, mostly because we were part of that online crap. So confession time, we were definitely the people that made fun of her, some of the people that made fun of her for all the stuff. I still kind of mock Tom Hiddleston for that t-shirt because that was a little bit ridiculous, but God love him, chase your joy. And we were not kind.
No,
at all. And I remember there was a BuzzFeed article, especially a couple of years ago, that talked about how essentially she made her entire fortune on the backs of other people and had no creativity. And I think back to that now, and I think that was a terrible piece of writing.
Horrible.
Really not true. Like even I went back and read it and I was like, oh, these points are not. No, this is just someone being, these points are people being really angry at a woman being successful, not understanding everything. So the documentary, just really quickly, is especially around, it's her whole journey, but more than anything, it's when she released the album Reputation, it's the moment that Kanye interrupted her.
Yeah.
Through the release of the album Reputation to the release of the album Lover.
Mm-hmm.
and what that kind of goes with that journey and her journey, which is pretty much like her 20s into her early 30s, which I cannot begin to tell you how little I would want that documented in public at a time of my life.
Absolutely.
Just would not want it. Just would not want it.
No.
So it's very obviously like she paid for it. Obviously, like we're kind of getting, but I thought very vulnerable. I thought very honest about everything from creativity to body image to how the public perceives you. This does not, like, it didn't attack Kanye at all, which I was very impressed by, because it could have
real easily.
And essentially just said, this is how I felt when this happened.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what made it so honest and so powerful, is it's a whole lot of like, I'm not mad at the DJs. I'm not mad at you guys. I'm not mad. I'm just telling you, this is how I felt when this happened. And that's the most radical storytelling, is this is how this felt.
Mm. Yeah. And I remember the first time we watched it together. We watched it together. And the moment where she said, like, when Kanye interrupted her at the VMAs, and, you know, she was up on stage and the sound wasn't really great, and she heard she couldn't tell if people were cheering or booing, and she didn't know if they were booing Kanye or her, and she thought they were booing her. And like
19, right?
Yeah. She thought they were agreeing with Kanye and booing that she won.
Yep.
And she said, she made the decision to disappear for a year because she thought that's what people wanted.
And she also says, I lived my entire life trying to make you all happy.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who I was if I wasn't doing that.
And like, I'm only here because I work hard and I'm nice to people. And like, the gendered elements of this are so important. Like, you can't tell Taylor Swift's story without talking about the expectation.
Yeah, and that's why one of her favorite songs of mine is The Man off of the Lover album. Yeah.
Yeah. And the pressure she was put under, especially like she talks about as she started out in country music before transitioning into pop, especially what it was like to be a young woman in country music and the expectations that are put on you in terms of behavior and performance. But I would argue country music's not that different from all the other genres, and how she was treated in pop music as well. And the balance between expecting her to be innocent and hypersexualizing her. And, we did this to Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and Janet Jackson and every female performer. But I think, her vulnerability, her willingness to talk about her body and health issues and mental health issues, all of that is just so exceptionally valuable to see, and on our various content platforms. We've also talked about The Weight of Gold a few months ago when we were talking about the Olympics, and they struck really similar notes to me in terms of the pedestals we put famous celebrities, high performing individuals on, and whatever their field is, their skill is, and the way the media treats them. All of this was a huge part of Miss Americana. And that we see her process of developing emotional intelligence. Like, literally, we are empathy educators who teach about emotional intelligence every day. And if you want to understand what that process looks like of reflecting on who you are, and she says, like, I had to deconstruct my entire belief system and build it back again.
Yep. And
that's the coolest thing. But low-key, some of my favorite parts of this documentary are watching how much of a creative genius she is.
Oh my gosh, it was like upsetting.
I did not understand, y'all. I did not understand how flipping talented she is, and her ability to write songs on the fly, and like watching her write The Man with her keyboardist, watching her tweak Me with the lead singer from, like, with the lead singer for Brandon, I think is his first name.
Brandon Urie, yeah,
from Panic at the Disco. And she's like, no, but I want you to do this with the way your voice sounds. And it's like, makes the whole song. And I was like, oh, okay, she's a musical genius. Yeah, I'm just scrolling through my notes. Writing the Man is one of my favorite scenes in any documentary ever. Done.
Yeah, and I was also struck with, because of how we treat young girls, it was obviously very difficult for her to form female friendships. Yeah. And that's going on. And that at one point when she really starts to stand up for herself and assert herself, it was the reminder that because she was a child star, she's asserting herself against her parents. And even in your 20s, those of us who are close with our parents, like asserting yourself against your parents is like a thing. Like my mom told me that asserting herself against her mother when she was in her 70s was still a thing. So, you have to kind of weigh that as well. And then the other thing I want to talk about is her sexual assault case.
Yeah.
In that, just if you missed the story or you haven't watched the documentary, very briefly, there was a radio DJ in, I want to say Tennessee, but I could be wrong.
Colorado. Okay,
there we go. A radio DJ in Colorado who groped her while they were doing a stand-up. And a stand-up, by the way, is anytime you see people in front of like a branded backdrop, that's called a step and repeat or a stand-up. And so they were posing and he groped her and she sued him. Mm-hmm. And then he sued her and it was a whole thing. And because he's obviously a class act and understands how sexual assault and power works. But what I was so impressed by as she talked about it was like very, very clearly, she's like, I have to do this because I have the power to do this. Mm-hmm. There are countless of women that this is normal. And I remember when Me Too came out, having a conversation with you about the number of times I'd been at bars and gotten groped and would never think about that as sexual assault because it happens so often. It felt weird singling it out as a problem. Mm-hmm. And I think in her brain space, she went on a similar journey where it's like, well, that was probably the 497 millionth time she'd gotten groped in her career.
God only knows.
But like at that point, she had had enough education, enough deconstruction, enough everything where she was like, you know what? No more.
Yeah.
We're making this not normal.
I think for me, it's one of them, I've run out of adjectives to describe what happens in this documentary, but and like you see her talking about it as she went through it. And she explains the whole situation that she complained and reported him to his boss. He was fired. He sued her for being fired. And then she countersued for $1 for the purpose of saying like, this is unacceptable. But she talks about the whole process of having to go back to Colorado and go on trial and all the horrible things that his attorneys said about her are all the things we always say about women in this. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you scream? Why were you wearing a short skirt? Like we always victim blame because we've removed men from the situation of violence against women. But then she also said the thing that kind of broke me a little bit as well. You don't feel any sense of victory when you win because the whole process is so dehumanizing. And she said all of this she was Taylor Swift. This was with 7 witnesses and a photograph. And so, she says, she's talking about it at a concert a year later. And she says, I just keep thinking about what it's like for all those humans who are abused and assaulted who don't have those things. And it's one of the starkest, I think, examples that we see of like how horrible it is for humans who are abused and how hard it is. Even if you're Taylor Swift and you have 7 witnesses and a photograph, you are still belittled and ridiculed and dehumanized to the point of a mental health crisis.
Because women's bodies belong to society and not to ourselves.
Yeah. And I think what I wanted to end on, and I paused the documentary so I could get this whole entire quote because this whole documentary is quotable. But when she gets to the end and she's talking about this constant pressure to reinvent yourself as a woman in the industry and how you are discarded, she says, in the elephant graveyard by 30, which is depressing and true. But she goes through this whole narration where be new to us, be young to us, but only in a new way and only in a way we want. and reinvent yourself, but only in a way that we find to be equally comforting, but also a challenge for you. Live out a narrative that we find to be interesting enough to entertain us, but not so crazy that it makes us uncomfortable.
Yep.
So we talk about the impact that the media has in this, and we did with The Weight of Gold, and the narratives that we sell about these celebrities and these high-performing individuals, and how culturally complicit all of us viewers can be so easily. And, you know, we talked about how we judged Tay-Tay, we judged Britney, we were poo-pooing Michael Phelps and judging him. And we honestly, as this documentary shows us, we have no idea what these humans' lives are like.
Nope. The thing is that we have a idealization in our human self that the more resources you have, the easier your life gets. And that is, it's just false. And there are elements certainly that are easier. There are things, but there are other prices that we pay. And in the economy of our lives, we have to always take in everything besides our bank account as well. And I think Taylor Swift is a great example with her gifted vulnerability to us to hold those things in tension. So it's on Netflix. And as far as we're concerned, it should live there forever. We hope it does. It's incredibly valuable. I've watched this with actually multiple people, and actually last year for her birthday, our trusted editor Eleanor, and another friend and I watched it all in a live stream and talking to each other because it was so good to talk about. And so it's really rich. I think it's good for millennial and younger Gen X and older Gen Z women also to look at how we interact with womanhood and public womanhood and what that kind of looks like. And I think about the differences, and we didn't get into race at all with Taylor for a whole host of reasons. But the sexualization of Black women over the purity of white women and what that needs to look like is a part of this as well. And how we reacted to Janet Jackson versus how we reacted to Taylor Swift versus how we react to Lizzo versus like all of those kind of things.
All of those things.
So it's all a part of it. But we'll be having those conversations in a million other videos because we'll be having that conversation until our last breath, I have a feeling. So we thank you so much for joining us today. If you loved the video, please hit that thumbs up and share with your friends, whether it's the pod, you're listening to this in your ear holes or watching it with your eyeballs. We would hope that you can join us in the conversation and invite anyone else who would like to be a part of it as well. And then we'll see you next time for another discussion of a documentary, a one-off thing that we hope will shape a little bit differently how you see the world.
Till then, take care, everybody.